we must view things that are close as if they were far away, and things that are far away as if they were close. This insight comes to us from an unexpected source, Miyamoto Musashi, which was he was a samurai, a Japanese samurai who was a Ronin, and he went, I think, 69-0 in one-on-one combat. And at the end of his life, he wrote the Book of the Five Rings and the Dokudo, which is like 21 rules for life. But in the Book of the Five Rings, he says, or brings to us the topic of this video, viewing things that are close as if they were far away, and things that are far away as if they were close. Now, why would it be beneficial to view things in this way? Well, first, the things that are close will soon be far away. How you act today, if you are lucky, will soon be a distant memory. And I think it's very valuable to act now in such a way that we will not regret in the future. And you can figure out how you should act based on how it will age. And say, for instance, you give into pleasure for the sake of pleasure, which is another rule that Miyamoto Musashi says never to do. Never give in to pleasure for pleasure's sake, he says. But say you do. That never ages well. You look back upon that time with dishonor, with disgrace, disgust, and you wish you didn't do it. And that's for the sole purpose that you were viewing something close as if it was close, instead of viewing it as if it was far away. And then viewing things that are far away as if they were close. For instance, death. Death presumably is far away for you. But if you view it as if something that is so close to happening, you'll live your life in a different way. You won't waste as much time on trivial matters that don't matter. You hear so many people who get a cancer diagnosis and they quit their job and they start enjoying their lives and start doing what they always wanted to do because they no longer have the fear, because they realize they're going to die. But isn't that our diagnosis from the day we were born? Only someone who views life so short-sighted forgets that they're going to die and lives in such a way that they forget they're going to die. Life implies death, but death implies life. But how wrong it is to let a diagnosis that you already knew about change your life. Someone tells you you're going to die. What did you expect? Did you think you were immortal? No, but you thought it would be further down the line. But you had no guarantee of this. And you lived your life in such a way that you had many years left to live. But you don't know that. And you lived each day in such a way where you can make up for it tomorrow. And then tomorrow you can make up for it the next day. And if you live every day like it's your last, one day you will be right. So I think in so many ways, we need to view things that are close as if they are far away, and things that are far away as if they are close. And it'll help us choose wisely. It's almost like a cheat code for choosing wisely. I am trying to lose weight, let's say, and I have the option to eat some ice cream. Yes, there will be pleasure in the moment. It will taste good. But if you view this short-term thing in a long-term way, you're not going to be left with the amazing taste. You're not going to be left with the pleasure. You're going to be left with fat, with regret from giving in to a temptation that you told yourself you wouldn't give into. And when you can, in the present, view the situation like that, you can be kind to your future self and say, you know what, I won't eat this. And then you can look back on that time with honor, with knowing you kept your word, with knowing you're someone of discipline and of integrity to yourself. And who better to have integrity to than yourself? If you can't keep your word to yourself, who do you expect to keep your word to? You shouldn't trust people who can't even keep the word to themselves, because they love themselves more than anybody, and they can't even love themselves enough to keep the word to themselves. You shouldn't trust people like that. They're not evil by nature, but they have tendencies that are not to be trusted. As so many things, in the moment, this is a very hard thing to remind oneself. That's why memorization is not your goal. Memorizing to see things as that are close as far away and far away as close, that is not the goal. Putting this on a mirror and seeing it every morning and writing it down 10 times, that is not your goal. Yes, that may help put it somewhere in there to remind you, but truly the goal is to understand, is to live life and look back on experiences in such a way that you understand what this means. You understand what it means and why it's valuable and why it's wise to do so. And if you can truly understand, then you can truly change. I think understanding is undervalued, because when you truly come to understand something, you cannot help but change. I'm truly of the belief that no soul is willingly deprived of the truth. And with that being said, if people were just able to understand, if they were no longer deprived of the truth, they would have no other choice to act in such a way that is correct, that is in accordance with truth. So understanding is really one's goal. So use this quote, maxim, to look back upon your life and apply to you right now and say, what are things that I'm viewing that are close to me that I'm viewing as if they are close instead of far away? And what are things that are far away that I am viewing as far away instead of close? Because like I said, if you view death as close, you can get a cancer diagnosis and not change the way you live at all. Someone will tell you you're going to die soon, and you'll say, I know. I've always known. Maybe not as soon as this, but I always knew. And truly, what's the difference between a year and 10 years? As it says in Ecclesiastes and in Meditations, nothing new under the sun. There's no difference between a year, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. All is the same. Nature is the same. The universal laws have not changed. And that's why these books of ancients are still so valuable, because nothing has changed. People are still greedy. People are still ambitious. People are still lustful. People still have pride. People are still virtuous. People still love. People still sacrifice for love. People still act with honesty, integrity. People still sacrifice their lives for others and for themselves. The true core and essence of humans has never changed. And it won't. Human nature will not change so easily. It is not history that repeats itself. It is human nature. And this, unfortunately, is why I believe we will never have peace. I thought it was once possible, but now I see that was a dream of a naive boy. It is impossible because human nature will not allow it. In times of peace, people will become greedy. And greedy for power, greedy for money, greedy for everything. And then when people get greedy, things dissolve. And then when things dissolve, true human nature comes out. The people who do horrible things. But we should not put ourselves on pedestals. Because when you truly think about the positions that people in history have been in, you cannot say for certain you would not act in the same way. You cannot say, oh, I would be different. You hear that so often with people, talking about back in the time of slavery and the Holocaust and the Soviet Union and just throughout history. Slavery was common, very common, and it was never looked upon as a moral fault until very recently. But somehow, some way, every human thinks that they would have been different. Somehow, some way, 500 years ago, everyone had slaves. Unless you were a slave. You were either a slave or you had slaves. But now, 500 years later, everyone is of a higher moral status. No. No. There was a moral evolution, and slavery is not good. It's good that it was abolished. But people who stand on their moral high horse are just herd animals who can't see their capacity to do evil because they've never had the chance to do evil. They've never been put in a position where there was two options and both were evil and they had to pick the lesser. They're people who have been born in upper middle class, who have never known a day of struggle, and they stand on their moral high horse saying, I would never do that. I don't know how people ever did that. And I say that from a person like that. I'm not any better, but I've now seen the capacity of my shadow, and which is a very telling thing. I don't know how we got to that point, or how I got to that point, but anyway, I think it's very valuable to understand that we have the capacity to do things that humans have always had the capacity to do. And if times truly went hectic, you would do things you thought you would never do. Human nature does not change. But back to the main point. View the things that are close as if they are far away, and the things that are far away as if they are close. And I think you will live a wiser life. You will live a life you are proud about looking back upon. Seneca has an essay on the shortness of life. And he talks about how life seems so short to the people who give into vice so often because they're so afraid to look back. They forget the past because there's nothing good in the past that they want to remember. All that's there is pleasure for the sake of pleasure. Things they regret, actions they wish they never took, actions they wish they took, things they regret they never did, things they regret they did. That's all the past holds for them. So the life is short to that person because they have no past. They don't want to look. They look back at the past like this with shades over their eyes. And they look to the future with eyes bright, believing it'll be good. And they're unaware that the only thing they ever have is the present moment. And they're going to act in this moment the same way they acted back then. And then over there, to all those prosperous times they thought they were going to have, they'll close their eyes like they did to their past always. Seneca said famously that life is not short. We just waste a lot of it. And that's, like I said, human nature doesn't change. And how is that not more true today than ever before with the things to distract ourselves? Seneca said in, 60 AD that people were wasting time and all this stuff. I mean, I look back and I'm like, how did you waste time in Rome in 60 AD? Like, what was there to do that was a waste of time? But Seneca observed it, and human nature doesn't change. We still waste so much time on so much trivial things. And like I said, human nature doesn't change. And from my understanding, Seneca says people waste time. People were wasting so much time on their vices. And is that any different than nowadays? Are our vices for, gluttony, excess, lust, greed? I was going to say ambition, but that can be a waste of time. Well, no, it can be nothing in excess. But I don't think ambition is, none of those things, they either are necessarily evils. All is what you think, all is mental. Things are neither good or bad. Thinking makes them so. And it is never what happens to you that matters, but how you react. I do not care what happened to you. I care how you reacted. There will be no pity parties thrown by me, but there will be honor bestowed to the person who acted honorably. Seneca had another amazing quote I read yesterday, and he said, it's truly amazing. He said, fire proves gold, misery brave men. I get chills saying that, and I mean, I like it. You might think it's stupid, but how true that is. We pray, we pray for strength, but we curse God when we receive hardship. How else did you expect to become strong, if not through hardship? Did you expect it to just be magically bestowed upon you? Did you expect to gain discipline without having to exercise discipline, without doing things you don't want to do when you know you must do them, you should do them? Did you expect to become stronger without pain? You go to the gym and you are in pain to grow stronger. And it's a pleasurable experience because you know the growth is coming. But we view life in a completely different sphere. We experience pain, we experience hardship, we experience difficulties, and we feel that pain, and we feel it in our biceps, and we understand growth is coming, but we feel it in our brain, and we think despair is to come. Change will always be uncomfortable, and there's no way to grow without change. So growth is uncomfortable. And if you don't want to grow, then you'll never be uncomfortable. But if you want to grow, you're going to have to learn to love the uncomfortable, to love being uncomfortable, and realize this is a sign of strength, not as a sign, or a sign of growth, not as a sign of God, universe, nature, or nothing, whatever you believe in, making you stronger.